Hi, welcome back to my podcast. This is part 2 of Iran. I've invited Morgan to come and share his stories. Hi, Morgan.
Hi.
I've always heard so many stories about Iran, right? Then a lot of people have all this misconception of the place.
Well, I mean, first of all, what kind of misconceptions have you usually heard?
Okay, you always thought Iran would be like this war zone. There will be a lot of danger,
Right,
and
okay.
it's not safe.
Okay.
You get robbed. You probably don't have a lot of good food when you get there. People are hostile.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, this is generally most people's impression. Of course, they're wrong. Would you like to share what do you think should have been corrected? I think.
Definitely. After I heard the experiences, I think I was lucky enough to have a friend that has gone there before, and that kind of prompted me to look at the kind of research online a little bit more and to find out what Iran really is like. And after having been there, I can definitely say for sure it's so far away from what people talk about in terms of a war-torn country or being hostile or whatnot. I think people might have confused it with Iraq somewhat, where there was a lot of wars happening, but in terms of Iran, I didn't see a single, in all honesty, I didn't see a single military based thing when I was there. There were security guards and there were attractions and there were policemen sometimes patrolling the streets, but that's pretty much what you would see all around the world. Other than that, people were super friendly, very warm, very welcoming, very curious about you, very curious about your culture, where you're from, and also why you came to Iran. They love to ask you that, and they are always very proud when you say that you are here to learn a little bit more and to find out more about their culture and about themselves and their lifestyles. They're very happy to share. Yeah.
So we all know that Iran is actually a Muslim country, and it's surrounded by all the other Middle Eastern countries.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So would you say that amongst all these other Middle Eastern countries, Iran is one of the safest to go to?
Okay, I can't really say vouch for that because in terms of the other Middle Eastern countries, I actually haven't been there, and I actually.
So you've only been to Iran?
Yes, correct. And I only transited at Dubai. That's about it. So yeah, I don't have that much experience with the rest. In terms of what I can tell, I don't know about how strict the rest would be, but I definitely don't feel much restriction when I was in Iran at all. It's basically almost similar to traveling to another country. The only restriction I felt was when certain sites were only allowed for Muslims, and that was very rare. Only one or two of all that I saw, as well as I think for the ladies they have to put a headscarf around their head. That's about it. Yeah, that there was no other additional things that I had to really look out for. Yeah.
Okay. Then what would you say is like that one thing most people do not know of Iran that you have discovered? Okay, or rather something that you heard people say about Iran, and then when you're actually there, you realize that, this was not true. Was there or was there not anything like that?
Well, I mean, there's tons of the usual one, which actually you've mentioned, war-torn country, hostile, I would say.
So obviously there's no war.
Absolutely none. Yeah, absolutely none. I don't feel hostile at all.
And getting there, visa was straightforward. Singaporeans have to get visas, right?
Yes, correct. For Singaporeans, we are allowed 2 weeks tourist visa, and it's visa on arrival, which means that you only get it when you arrive at the airport, which does give me a little bit of anxiety because I've never done that before. So once you alight the plane, at least for me, I make a left, I walk down this very long corridor, and then actually I come to this open space where some people are doing the processes. So first of all, you have to get an official insurance. So if your insurance does not cover the country Iran, you will have to get their insurance. So there's a booth for that where you just apply, and just for the sake of not getting into trouble, I decided to get one. And then after I get that, which takes all of like 10-15 minutes, you head over to the visa booth, you submit all your documents and your payment, and then after that they will call out your name, and then you can come and get your visa in about, say, I think I got it in 20 to 30 minutes. Yeah.
The whole process is just half an hour.
Yeah,
less
correct.
than half an hour.
Yeah. So I was lucky because I landed in a late flight, and I think ours was the only flight at that time, so there was only about 20 of us, so that didn't take too long. But I would guess, I've heard of other travelers where it took about an hour or so, but generally it wasn't an uncomfortable space, so you can always just sit around and just wait, or talk to some of the other travelers, which happened as well when I was there waiting for the passport. The only thing I would advise though when you're applying for that is that they will ask you to put your first place of residence as well as a phone number. So the reason, I guess, is they want to make sure that you actually are here and you have a place to stay, rather than some other reasons or whatnot. So for that, some people have actually advised online that you can just kind of put any space or any hotel or whatnot and then just put their number. But it's not actually a good idea, because they actually do check. So they do actually call and they do find out your details. So what actually happened was that there was a guy from China that also arrived, and he put a place. He didn't book anything, and he put a place at random. And
they checked.
And we both processed at the same time. So like both of us submitted the form at the same time. But when I had checked out, he was still there, and the funny thing is...
not a good move.
Yeah, that's not a good move. And the funny thing is that I actually saw him later part of my travel. And
also, he made it into Iran.
Yeah, so he finally made it in. And I asked him, I was so worried about you and everything. So what happened? How long did you take? Then he said, he took about another 20 to 30 minutes later.
I wonder, how does he explain himself?
Yeah, I have no idea as well. But yeah.
So you just have to make sure you get yourself some sort of a lodging,
yes,
get their contacts,
yes,
and then register it.
Yes.
Right? You can't just go there and then hope that you can find an accommodation.
Yes. Correct.
Even if you did that, you have to be honest as well.
Yes.
And tell them, I don't have accommodation.
Correct.
I'm going to look for it.
Yeah.
And probably by then they would kind of understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because as you mentioned in the first podcast, that you can't really do a lot of monetary transaction online. So there are restrictions.
Correct.
And the example they brought up, this guy from China, that's even more complex.
Correct. Yeah.
So
luckily he did manage to come in, because I wouldn't have imagined what it would be like to return on the flight.
Well?
He was alone as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that I would advise if, let's say, you are to go, at least the first one. Yeah.
Then what about in general? Do you find that Iran is a safe country? Or it sounded like, from first podcast, it sounded like this is a very tourist friendly country to visit. But what about their security? You've been there for 14 days. You might somehow have experienced good security or anything to be concerned about.
Yeah, I think in terms of security, when you talk about most of the tourist places, you will see a few policemen around and everything, and guarding. And then of course at the sacred sites or at some of the tourist attractions, you'll definitely have a lot of people there, either guides or security guards or policemen, just helping people out. Also at those places, you will also meet up with a lot of tourists, tourist guides, and they will basically offer their services to you and say that, if you would like me to take you around, learn more about the place, this is my card, feel free to call me, and then I can bring you to these places. So that's what you often will encounter. So I don't see any difference in terms of the security over in Iran as opposed to anywhere else that I've traveled.
For me, I usually gauge a place. I have my own unique ways, whether or not you can walk around on your own at night.
Okay.
As like a rough indication of how safe this space is.
Okay. So if you use that method as an indication, me myself, I've had no issues. Sometimes it's a bit disconcerting because, for example, the place that I stay in Isfahan, it's called Hauzak House. It's a little bit off the main area. So when I walk back through the bazaar areas, there are parts where it's not lit, so it's really quite dark at night. There will be a stretch that is dark, so you'll see a light in the distance, and then you just walk towards it, right?
So first of all, this is a city that we're talking about.
This is a city, yeah, the city of Isfahan. So the bazaar itself is huge, and so the outer regions of it tunnels out kind of to the different areas and different residential areas. So mine is in a very distinct residential area, and this is like a little home run business, and I really fell in love with it, and which is why I kind of didn't mind kind of walking a little bit out of the bazaar to kind of reach that place. So sometimes there'll be stretches of darkness, which I think as Singaporeans we tend to be
a bit kanchong.
Yeah, we get a bit kanchong when it's very dark and you can't see.
I would.
Yeah, but in all honesty, it was very safe. Nothing happened. There was no people lurking around, and you will see ladies also walking around like that as well. It's not an issue, but I think again for ladies in general, because of maybe just for their own personal safety, it's always better to choose the brighter areas or walk in pairs or have a companion. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Again, around the world I think it's the same, but generally I don't get any sense of fear or danger when I'm in Iran at all. Yeah.
Okay. Then the next thing I want to ask you is, you have been there for 14 days, did you visit any museums while you're there?
The Iran culture and history is so rich and diverse, and then
predominantly Muslim, Islamic.
Yes, so definitely a lot of Islamic stuff, but
architectures and everything.
Yes, yeah, but because of the bits where they were a bit more liberal and stuff, where other foreign influences came in, you would also see some sort of those in some of the museums as well. But most of it, I would say, is very, very Persian-centric. So a lot of the sites have all the Islamic art and or are like Persian kind of fortresses and hills and whatnot.
So you did go into a few of the so-called typical tourist attractions, like museums and
yes, correct,
fortresses.
Yeah. So anything from Persepolis, which is like an old Persian empire city, to museums that showcase Islamic art and some of the royal palaces and everything, to certain private houses where they had kind of certain famous people who stayed there, everything. And I think one of the more famous the most famous sites in Iran tend to be their mosques or their, I guess, mausoleum in the case of Shah Cheragh. But their mosques are the ones that are super popular and very attractive. And I think one of the most publicized ones on social media is the Pink Mosque, which is Nasir al-Mulk. That's in Shiraz. So that's the pink mosque, the one where you see the whole thing with a lot of stained glass colors coming in a very pink setting. So yeah, that's quite spectacular. But there are a lot of other mosques that have very similar, astounding qualities as well. Yeah.
Do you have to pay to go into this?
Yes, yeah. So most of these highlights are you have to pay. There's actually a local rate and which for them, and there is a tourist rate. So, but yeah, I'm happy to pay the tourist rate and just visit them because they are absolutely worth it. Yeah.
And did you manage to visit any music concerts or a performance when you're there?
Performances, no.
Or even on the street, buskers.
Yeah, okay. So for
is
that,
common?
Busking is not very common there, but because it was Nowruz, which is their New Year, there were certain spontaneous performances on the road. So there was one where I was in Yaz, and then suddenly I saw this line of boys that had their that were wearing a certain kind of costume, and they were doing kind of almost like a mime performance. It's their dance, but because of the way that they dressed and painted themselves, it looks more like a mime act of sorts as they gestured out certain acts. There would also be one or two spontaneous displays and performances from artists during that time, some of which will again be like a mime and make fun and interact with the public, but generally all in good fun and really entertaining to watch. In terms of more local experiences, I had a very good portion of that in that same place that I was talking about earlier, Hauzek House. That's in Isfahan. So the proprietors themselves are big fans of music as well as art. So they love to show local music and art to tourists when they stay with us, to the guests. And one big part of it was a walking tour where they brought me and some of the other guests to a cultural center of sorts. It's kind of a little compound, and different artisans actually have their workshops there. So from the wood printing Kalanka art, where they kind of use wood carvings and they print out cloth, to actually a World Guinness record making metalsmith who made the world's smallest lock and key. We actually saw them over there at their workshops, and them talking a little bit about their craft and sharing that as well. And I got to also do a bit of the wood print as well, which is a big honor, because the wood blocks themselves are hundreds of years old and passed down from generation to generation, and usually only the master craftsman can actually handle them. But he was very generous, and he said, yeah, please go ahead and use some of those pieces. So I tried out and printed it, and then
Did you brought them back?
Yes, I actually brought it back. Yeah, so it was a very cool souvenir. Yeah, it's like my own hand-printed T-shirt of sorts, and I happen to have a white T-shirt, so I could do that on that. And then I bought back a kind of a fabric, well, not really a carpet, but like a rug of sorts, which was thinner than the typical carpet, so I could actually fold it up. Yeah, so that was probably my most memorable cultural experience, and it was very humbling to see, record-setting masters over there, as well as there was someone who was making instruments, and he himself has worked with Grammy Award-winning artists as a background musician. So just astounding talent in such unexpected places. Yeah.
Then just now you mentioned it was their New Year period. What do you call that again?
Nowruz. So it's spelled Nowruz or Rus, depending. Yeah, you have different spellings of it, but Nowruz, yeah.
And what happened during Nowruz?
So they will have...
Is it just for one day? Or?
No, it's like I think it's, if I'm not wrong, it's like a 10 to 15 day period. So, but the holiday...
Such a long holiday.
Yeah, it's kind of like the traditional Chinese New Year holidays, right? It's a bit longer.
So 10 public days of rest.
I don't think it's that long though. I think the actual days of rest is only maybe about 5 days or maybe a week. I could be wrong.
But traditionally it's supposed to carry on for 10 days.
Yeah, so the festival itself lasts for quite a while. So basically they would actually have kind of this little setup at home which kind of invites different blessings into their house. So they would have eggs and certain sweets or whatnot put into a little platter, and then they will put it in the house as kind of like a display. So even at the places,
and also for guests to eat.
No, not you can't really eat those things that they put there. It's almost like an offering of sorts. It's like a symbol. It's a symbolic actually. Okay. But of course, if you want to eat anything that's on there, just let your host know, and they're more than happy to serve you some portions of it. So one thing for sure, if you go to those boutique hotels and those,
you will see all this
family-run stuff, you would see all of this, and they will always be happy to offer you anything that you want, a tea or any of the snack that you see over there.
And is there
free.
And is there any special event during Nowruz?
As far as I know, depending on the tradition and the belief that you subscribe to, because there is a very old religion there which is Zoroastrian, and that one is a little bit pagan in a way. So there's a lot of fires being lit and all that. So there's a mixture of some rituals and things that happen, but I'm not so familiar with the actual practice in itself. So what I see most as a tourist when I walked about was some random displays of performances, which was very, very interesting and unique, as well as those displays. I can't remember the name right now, but yeah, usually has an egg and it's very colorful and has some like 7 or 8 other little small platters around it laid out. Very beautiful stuff, yeah.
Okay. So as a tourist during Nowruz, do you think you would recommend like any special thing that you should do just to be able to experience it while you're there, if you happen to be there during that period? Or it's just like any typical festival, you just kind of soak in whatever that is that you chance upon?
Yeah,
they don't really have any special highlight.
I think they maybe had some special highlights, but I didn't see.
Encounter it.
I was just already quite overwhelmed and happy with what I have. I guess maybe I'm not big on festivals and all that where there's big crowds of people, because maybe the focus that I like is one-to-one, and I can ask more and learn more from the people around me, and spontaneous things that I see I guess give me more delight than going specifically to one event. So I just love walking around and dropping by different places and then spotting what happens in between, and then making friends in between who will lead me and recommend me to somewhere else. So yeah, that was actually my best form of traveling in Iran in itself. The thing about Nowruz is that businesses do close, so again, kind of like Chinese New Year. So in a way, it's not the best time to go. I would say maybe the best time, so unless you're very festival specific, like you want to go during that time where one or two few things do occur unusually. For example, the president actually sends you a greeting on SMS on your phone, which is kind of
really?
Yeah,
to everyone.
Yes, to everyone, even tourists. So I received one and I was wondering what that was, and I showed it to my host, and she said, "Oh, that's the greeting from your president, from our president to you." And I was like, "Oh, that's so interesting and cool." But yeah, so other than that, I would say that actually maybe you might want to avoid the first few days and then come maybe about a week after Nowruz and still kind of see some of the celebrations, but at least the businesses are open.
Any interesting encounters in general?
Too
with
many
locals, with
too many
with
to
other
count.
fellow tourists?
Yeah, I mean, I've just made so much friends when I was traveling in Iran and hearing about the reasons why they're here. I met Malaysians and Swiss people from Australia and Austria and Netherlands, and some of them I still keep in contact to this day on Instagram. And there's just a lot of encounters that are always so friendly, that leads up to something unexpected, that makes every kind of visit to any place very memorable. Maybe just one example, Nasir al-Mulk, which is the mosque I talked about earlier, the pink mosque, the very beautiful mosque. It's supposed to be best when you go early in the morning because of the sunlight that comes through. So we actually reached the place on a slightly drizzly day at about 9 something. I think it's supposed to open at 10. But at 10 o'clock, nothing happened. And then at 10:15, nothing happened. So we started to get a bit worried. We were wondering whether it would open. Again, partially because Nowruz and partially because it's winter and they have different timings sometimes. So there was a guy who actually walked past, this old gentleman walked by, and we tried to ask him, like, is it going to open? Is there someone that we could talk to? Because usually they have a ticketing window open, but there's nothing there. It's just one door. And so we were just waiting outside, hoping that it would open. So that old guy didn't actually speak English. So what happened is that he actually waved his hand, shook his head, and then he walked off.
What does that mean?
So yeah, we weren't very sure what that means. But 5 minutes later, this guy actually turned the corner, came back and said, "Oh, this old man told me that you guys needed some help." So
he went to get help.
Yeah, so actually he got someone along the way, and that's again a symbol of generosity and friendliness that and help that you see in the local people, even if they don't speak English, that they will go out of their way to find someone else to come and help you. So we managed to actually find this guy who actually told us that maybe sometimes they're not on the dot with opening, so just wait a while more, and then he left, and then 5 minutes later it was open. But just visiting the site, of course, is beautiful, but having little encounters which are so heartwarming makes it even a lot more memorable. So a lot of these kind of things would happen when I travel in Iran, and I'm sure to anyone who actually visits there. Yeah.
So, what would you say is like your impression of Iran after visiting the place? A general impression.
I kind of went there expecting it to be kind of in between the stories that the bias and stereotypes that it was war-torn and hostile and restricted and just not maybe a very great place to travel, as opposed to the glowing reviews that the bloggers have of the place, that it was warm, friendly, everything that you thought that it wasn't. And so I was expecting something in between just to balance myself out a bit. But it actually was leaning much towards what all the other bloggers have mentioned about it being such a beautiful place. It is incredibly beautiful, with a huge variety of attractions to see, whether you're the sort of people that likes museums and culture, or someone who loves natural beauty or ancient sites. I think these are Iran is a great place to see all of these, and the people who are exceptionally friendly and warm. All of this points towards it being much, much closer to those glowing reviews. And I myself, if between 1 to 10, I would give it easily a 9.5.
That's very high.
Yeah, it has remained one of my most memorable trips because it just outperformed itself on all levels, from food to people to culture, to what you see in the photos to what you see in real life. Just everything. I have so much stories that came out from Iran as opposed to all of my other trips. Yeah.
So if my question is, would you ever go back again?
Absolutely. In fact, I made such a
In
big
a heartbeat.
I made such a big commitment that I actually had leftover money from like euros and US, and I actually exchanged them all for reals. And so that came up to be like about 1 million reals, and I actually didn't have to, but I did that because I was that sure that I'm going to come back again. Yeah, and I still have them at home.
So I'm sure you will not go back to the same, because you mentioned you went to the southern part.
Yeah. So that's the thing. Actually, I would. It is that incredible, and I feel I haven't explored it enough. Given that I only spent about 3 days or 4 days in one city, I feel that I can easily spend another 3-4 days. There were places that I have not covered because they are that big, or there are things that I would willingly visit again. Again, for example, Hausak House and the cultural place and the cultural compound. I would love to have seen some of the other artisans that were there. The bazaar itself and the the Nasir square is huge, so I would love to walk through it all over again. Just Shiraz in itself, I didn't even get to go to the garden, so there is just so much that I still haven't touched, and I would be very, very happy to go back again. But yes, probably maybe my priority will be to visit the north this time, which generally has more, the focus is more on the natural sites and very stunning views and very unusual landscapes and everything. But yeah, it's happy to go back to the south anytime. Yeah.
Last question. What's that one advice you give to any traveler who's visiting Iran?
One advice, it's a bit hard to... other than the practical ones, the one that I would just say is to... when you go, maybe just have a very open heart. Try not to impose maybe some of the cynicism that city living has given to you, to the country. And I think you will realize that the world is... can still be a very beautiful and honest and pure place to be in. And there are people with no agenda other than to want to know about you and your culture, and to just embrace you for who you are. So yeah, it's that's probably my one
What
advice.
about money?
Money, okay, for money, I think it's good if you are an average traveler who just eats average meals, don't spend too much on shopping, because there can be a lot of things to buy if you are the sort that loves.
But we're talking about like
crust.
cultural shopping, right? We're not talking about branded goods.
Oh yeah, no,
stuff.
yeah, not so much. Yeah, they have their own designers and all that, mostly in Tehran. But when you go to places like Shiraz and Isfahan, you will have tons of cultural, local trinkets and everything to buy. They are astounding. They're very, very beautiful. And of course, if you love your local produce, they are famous for saffron.
Mhm.
You know, they are the world's top saffron producer. They're also
And pistachio? I
and
read.
yes, their pistachios is delicious. Again, I'm not a foodie, but then when I tasted their pistachios, I was like, it really tastes different. It's so fragrant and so tasty. So yeah, I bought huge bags of it back. Yeah.
So okay, how much should I bring?
I think a good estimate, if you were to include hotel stays or hostel stays.
Okay, those aside.
Yeah, okay, those aside. So just spending,
Yeah.
so food, attractions, as well as some light shopping.
Mhm.
Maybe about very, very safe. You want Sing dollars or US?
Sing dollars.
Okay, Sing dollars maybe about 100 a day.
Okay,
Yeah, I think that's
sounds
very,
very reasonable.
very safe. Yeah.
And you can already have a good time, live very comfortably.
That's a comfortable amount.
Budget.
Yes, yeah. If you wanted it to be a little bit more safe, if you are a little bit more paranoid, you
little
like
bit
a
more.
buffer, then yeah, 150, yeah, is definitely okay. So sometimes there are some adjustments, because you
Yeah.
have those options to take the train or to take a cab. They also have a system where you can share cabs with strangers as well. And then you have options of taking or staying in certain places or eating in more expensive restaurants. So as long as everything is average, 100 I think is definitely comfortable. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you so much for sharing all your stories.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
No, not a problem. Thanks for asking me and inviting me to do this.
Okay, I'll see you in the next one.
See you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Oh, that one we're still recording. Sorry.
Which one?
I thought this last part. I thought it was just you telling me things, so I didn't know.
Oh
it was
no,
recording.
I just want to add that into the.
That's why I leaned back.
Thank you.